Was that an email that came? Yeah.
Hey, good evening. The Special Design Review Board public meeting of December 15th, 2016 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and to submit it to staff. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project that is returned for redesign by the Design Review Board must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Please note that all appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the Design Review Board decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his discretion. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian.
Here.
Board Member Charchian.
Here.
Board Member Malikian is absent and out sick. And Chairman Simonian.
Present.
Thank you. Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on December 8th, 2016. Oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. I have no oral communication cards.
Neither do I.
Okay. And which brings us to the regular calendar and the Design Review Board cases. Staff would like to announce that the first case on tonight's agenda, which would be PDR 1329554 for a new multifamily project located at 510 and 512 West Durand Street, has been taken off calendar. We have received new information at the last minute and at the request by staff and the city attorney. That item has been taken off today's agenda. Therefore, 3 cases remain on tonight's agenda, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to Chairman Simonian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, and happy holidays to everybody and a happy new year. I think this is the last session for this year, so we want to wish everyone a very, very happy holiday season. We're going to start off with our first case, which is PDR 1527952B. And Ms. Azadi is our case planner, so take it away.
Thank you. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 2-story, 2,785 square foot single-family residence with an attached 2-car garage at 1723 Sombra Drive. This project was last reviewed by the Design Review Board on August 11th of this year. The decision was a return for redesign with 4 conditions. The applicant has revised the proposal as it relates to those conditions, and we are here before you today with that project. The site is comprised of 2 undeveloped lots totaling 9,330 square feet with approximately 91 feet of street frontage and is located in the R1 single-family zone, floor area District 2. The proposal to build a new house on this project site is exempt from CEQA review as a Class 3 new construction exemption. As proposed, the project complies with all development standards of the R1 zone and no variances are required. The project site is located along the north side of Sombra Drive at the terminus of the road and is adjacent to a secondary pedestrian access point to Glorietta Park. There is an existing driveway easement along the westerly portion of the project site that's tied to the neighbor located at 1719 Sombra. There's a total of 13 live oak trees on the project site. The indigenous tree report, addendums, and comments from Urban Forestry Department have been included with the staff report and are on file as part of the public record. As part of the proposal, the same 3 of the 13 oak trees are proposed to be removed. To date, staff has received numerous comments from neighbors in regards to the proposed project. All comments received have been placed before you, and they are in opposition of the project. As part of the comments that were received by neighbors and sent to you earlier this week, the neighbors hired an arborist to prepare an independent indigenous tree report that was provided to you earlier this week, and I also have provided copies to you up at the dais. In terms of site planning, the existing conditions on site, which include the 13 oak trees, the recorded driveway easement along the westerly portion, and the curved front property line, influence the project site planning, as well as the proposal to build a new 2-story home with an attached garage, rather than a 1-story home with a detached garage that would be more in keeping with the predominant neighborhood pattern. The new home is sited towards the easterly half of the project site in such a way as to address the zoning regulations, the driveway easement, and minimize the removal of oak trees required. The project site is located in the Verdugo Woodlands neighborhood, which is primarily developed as single-family homes in a variety of architectural styles. Somer Drive features 1-story homes with an eclectic mix of styles. As such, the proposed craftsman-inspired style of the new house would be appropriate. In terms of architectural detailing, the chosen style incorporates appropriate siding and detailing that reflect the craftsman-inspired style. The front door is located within a recessed entryway, provides visual interest to the front elevation, and the wood material with partial glazing and side lights is appropriate to the style. The new windows are white fiberglass with external grids and will be recessed in the openings with wood sills and frames consistent with the style. The materials proposed include hardy plank cladding, asphalt shingle roofing, and a stone veneer at the base of the columns. As detailed in the staff report, the applicant has revised the proposal to address the conditions from the last DRB meeting. As it relates to the overall mass and scale of the project, the applicant has reduced the size of the house from 3,118 to 2,785 square feet. That is a reduction of 333 square feet, primarily on the second floor. The second floor remains part of the proposal, reduced in size and redesigned to feature greater setbacks from the first floor exterior walls than the previous proposal. Those exact dimensions were detailed in the staff report. The overall height of the home has been reduced from the previous proposal by approximately 1 foot 9 inches. The overall height of the new house will be 20 feet 4 inches. As it relates to limiting impacts on the site's oak trees, the proposal still requires the removal of 3 oak trees. However, the crown reduction as specified in the indigenous tree report is only required for trees 5 and 7. The smaller second floor and building setbacks have reduced the amount of trimming that would be necessary. The building footprint has been reduced from the previous proposal. It's less square with building indentations at the first floor on the north and south elevations. Also, the attached 2-car garage, as suggested previously, has been moved closer to the street. It has been pushed to the 25-foot street front minimum setback. The volume of the new attached garage does project beyond the front elevation of the home, but because of the curvature of the lot, as seen from the street, the 2 volumes would be in line with that 25-foot minimum street front setback line. As discussed during the last hearing, the applicant is elected not to utilize the northern portion of the lot near the driveway easement where there's less tree coverage. That area is proposed to be maintained as an open backyard area for the project site. Condition number 3.
Was that the rear portion that you're referring to?
The north portion where it's open.
Northwest.
Northwest, yes, sorry.
The top left corner?
Yes.
Okay.
Condition number 3 from the last DRB meeting was to eliminate the second floor or relocate, or second floor balcony or relocate it. That balcony has been omitted from the proposal altogether. As it relates to condition 4 from the last meeting, the arborist report, as noted earlier, was updated through an addendum dated September 27th of this year. All those documents have been reviewed by city staff, including the urban forester, who is here to answer questions. I also believe the applicant's arborist of record is here as well to answer questions. As noted in the staff report, we are recommending approval of the project with conditions and 1 consideration. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
I have kind of a big picture question. This project came in front of us back in August, so it was very recently, and I think we all kind of recall the details. There was a lot of discussion about reorienting the site, redesigning the project within the site, so it wasn't as impactful. I think we spent a lot of time talking about possible L-shaped site plan, not a square, and, you know, if you kind of squint and look at the drawings, it's kind of the same thing. And so, just being really upfront and to the
Yeah.
point, especially beginning of the hearing here, a lot of time was spent on trying to prescribe what the board thought was an appropriate way to deal with this very unique property. But I don't really see any of those really being addressed. I mean, there's little minor variations being done here and there, but the big picture kind of still seems to be the same.
Really a question for the applicant, I would say.
I assume the questions came up during.
Oh, yeah,
discussion.
we work very hard in general when we have conditions to try to make each of those conditions be met. And there was a choice to maintain that open space on the applicant's part that he would probably be able to address. There were other changes, moving the garage forward, reducing the square footage. There were changes that we thought did substantially alter the project from what you saw before, but definitely that was not, that was considered and rejected as an option for the proposal.
Do we have questions for staff? Georgian, I think you had some questions.
I had.
Arborist report?
Yeah, I did. So we have a unique situation that I haven't dealt with in the last 3.5 years on DRB, in which the neighbors have gone ahead and gotten a tree report issued. And I just wanted to reference back to the indigenous tree report, which was updated, and maybe there's been a change in letterhead, and that's why I'm kind of looking at this. But was the original report produced by Mr. Margosian of Bardes?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming that the city arborist has reviewed the one submitted by Carlsberg?
Carlberg?
Carlberg?
Correct.
Okay. So now we have some conflicts between these two, would you say, especially in reference to the trees that are number 2 and number 3, closer to the driveway?
I wouldn't say conflict. I felt that the reports fairly well agreed with each other. I think Carlberg raises some concerns that Mr. Margosian raised, but he took them. I guess he took the location of the trees and the proposed driveway and the walkway as being having more severe effects than Mr. Margosian did. As far as what I read, I think forestry as well addressed those comments.
Okay. And just in general terms, does Glendale, does your department feel that this project with the revisions is acceptable at this point? Meaning, so the way I read, so I'll just to clarify, the way I read the homeowner report that was submitted was that there were concerns about the driveway impacting the trees 2 and 3, a little bit more so than Barda's landscaping's report. And so, where would you weigh in on specifically trees 2 and 3, which are in the front where the proposed driveway is for the garage?
So, and I place this in my comments as well. There are ways of minimizing the impact of the driving material. I believe in the plans I have, they suggested a 2-foot subbase. And certainly if we could do the driveway at grade or with paving stones and minimize the amount of soil disruption, soil compaction, the location of the driveway would be much more acceptable. The impacts would be minimized. In addition to that, I'd also suggested that perhaps we tie the walkway into the driveway as opposed to making the walkway cut between trees 2 and 3. So the location and the size of the house, considering that the property owner has made accommodations to our requests, we found they were reasonable.
And what about this concept of doing hand-dug exploratory trenches? Is that something that's done on a regular basis, or is this extraordinary request?
We've suggested it in a fair number of previous indigenous tree reports and forestry comments.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
One more question. I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
go
I just
ahead.
want to get clarification. You indicated that the area in the back, I would call that the north, that'd be west corner, would be
Adjacent
used,
to the easement?
adjacent to the easement, that that's being kept as an open space instead, and was your comment that instead of being used as an alternate place for the garage?
In conversations with the applicant, the primary reason why that area is not being utilized for the massing, aside from, concerns about impacting other oak trees, was to maintain it as an open yard area. I would defer that question to the applicant
Okay.
as to why they decided, but that is my understanding from my discussions with them and Jay's as well.
Okay, so now I gotta go back to our arborist and ask a question. It seems that that area, if it was to be utilized for a garage, would you think that that'd be less impactful or more impactful than the current location that where they're suggesting the garage?
More impactful, because I feel like in order to construct the house, especially in that location, they'd have to drive back and forth the entire lot. They'd be stacking materials across the entire lot.
Not the house, a garage.
I felt that it would be the same, that because they still have to work their way across the unit for access, that since we'd be driving any kind of equipment they would be using, especially, and the location of the driveway itself, unless they changed the footprint of the house and made the driveway as part of the proposed footprint.
Yeah,
Okay,
A
thank you.
driveway to reach that area would impact, I believe, several trees just to get you to that area.
There's an existing driveway that services the house in the back.
It belongs to the neighbor, though, so we couldn't force them to use that driveway. There's just a portion that's an easement.
I think
Okay.
some of the comments previously that we were
These are the
discussing
things that we
internally,
talked about.
not so much though moving the garage there, it was moving some of the building there. And so it wasn't
Adjusting
Adjusting
the
the site
mass.
plan.
site plan, so it was more of an L-shaped or V-shaped site plan.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as much of
We
a
also-
square and concentrated.
So you shift some of the mass from.
We
front
also,
to the
I
back.
think, discussed a detached, garage.
Yeah.
That's what I
We
recall.
might have, yeah.
So,
It was a
okay.
long discussion,
It was a
actually.
very long day.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Ready to
All
move
right,
forward.
so I have an applicant, Craig Phillips, and I also have a Robert Hall as the owner. Who would like to start off from your? Come on up, introduce yourself for the record.
Craig Phillips, 2123 Vestal Avenue. I am the project applicant, as you guys mentioned. We saw this August 11th this year. And if you do look at the plans a little bit more closely, you'll see that we did indeed meet all of the recommendations you set forth in that meeting. Vista outlined them pretty appropriately. Obviously, one of the sticking points you have right now is that northwest spot. So if you could look at sheet T1B, that's the existing plan. As the trees are right now, it's actually right behind you as well. You'll see that that space isn't actually very large at all. The 3 oak trees that we're removing, they would be removed in almost any configuration of a house. Whether it's the access driveway, whether it's the house itself, whether it's a detached garage, there's really no way to get back to that corner without impacting oak trees. So we decided, yes, to keep it as open space and to situate the house where we put it. I think if you look at the overlays, you'll see that it's actually a pretty good spot to sit the house, right? The canopy on that eastern side is actually pretty vacant, about the same amount of open space as the northwest corner. So it was more important for us to stack the house as far to the north and east as possible, close to the park, where there's quite a bit of foliage, and away from the street. If we were to push it to the top left corner, the northwest corner, at the minimum 6-foot rear and the 6-foot side yard setbacks, that we'd be certainly looming over adjacent properties a lot more. So in keeping with that and our arborist recommendations, we kept the house where it is. We significantly reduced the second floor volume as you requested. Now 2/3 of the building is on the first floor, only 1/3 is on the second floor. That, in addition to reducing the look of it from the street and side yard, we also reduced the amount of trimming that we need to do for any canopies that overhang the house. I'll say that some of the concerns that we've been hearing are in regards to access to the property for construction. I know it is a tight street. I know that there's an oak tree that actually protrudes out into Sombra. I will say that the owner of the property has procured permission from the adjacent property owner to use that driveway for construction access, should he need it. We also have a pretty significant driveway for light vehicles. That the house is set far enough back that they can actually park light weight vehicles there during the construction process. So I hope that remedies that concern. In addition, we, as Vista mentioned, removed the balcony from the rear. In addition to that, we only put a closet and the master bedroom on that second floor and raised the sill heights of those windows to 4'9", so privacy into the rear yard of 1720 Willow should be, all those requirements should be met. Our setbacks on the second floor are now 16 feet from the front, 6.5 from the western side, and we also added a rear setback as well to break up the volume space back there. Lastly, given the recommendations in the tree report, we will likely go to a grade beam and pad foundation system to minimize the amount of digging that we have to do. So we'll be able to place those pads where there's areas of limited root development and then span across the root system itself using concrete grade beams. That's all. I'm available for questions if you have any to me.
What I'm going to probably do is I do have some questions, but I'll probably come more during the rebuttal stage.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll reserve my questions till then.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Robert Hall?
I'm just here to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay. Thank you. We have Mr. Arsen Argosian, the arborist. Would you like him? Do you have any questions for him, Mr. Charchian?
If he has a speaker card, he wants.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Would you like to speak, or are you just here for questions as well?
There are questions I'd like to answer.
That's what I thought, yeah. Okay. Do we have any questions for?
Maybe a rebuttal.
Maybe a
Since
rebuttal.
Since we're reserving.
Okay. Very good.
for that.
Thank you, sir. Then we're going to move on to Phil Saw. Welcome.
Thank you. So my comments are,
I'm sorry, would you mind starting
Oh.
with, state your name
Sure.
for the record, please?
so my name is Phil So. I'm a resident of 1722 Willow Drive, which is adjacent to the property. Would be on the northwest corner as well. It's like an 11 o'clock sort of line. But anyways,
So are you this structure over here?
yes. Wait.
No,
Yes.
That's
Yeah, that is.
1720 Willow Drive. He's 1720.
So I'm right next to 1720, which let me see if.
Are you this one? Yeah, come on.
Where is?
This one's 1719.
Okay, and then where's 1720? This is so I'm
He's-
here.
Is it the red tile roof, Mr. Stowe?
Yes, the red
Yeah,
tile.
So it'd be
this guy.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So you're one house behind.
Yes.
There's a house between you.
No. Well, it's kind of a weird layout, but actually I'm not one house behind. I'm actually that property butts up against my property too.
Okay.
But it's a sliver. But nonetheless, the trees and everything does affect my backyard. So.
Gotcha.
So I have 3 young kids. I live in the house and a wife, of course. And so when we bought the house 10 years ago, that whole area that was part of an adjacent home, an adjacent property. And I believe the owner, Mr. Hall, purchased the property, sold the house, and now wanted to develop the property with the oak trees on it. And so when I purchased the house, the realtor at that time told me that those trees were protected, that it was there for decades, and it would be virtually impossible to develop on that property. Nonetheless, I realize that's false. So I've been very opposed to development of that property because it's called the Verdugo Woodlands, the neighborhood we live in, and so I think everyone that resides in that neighborhood considers the trees in the area very, very sacred to a certain degree. And although I realize that the property owner has a right to build, I believe that the size of the project is still too large. It was large at the beginning. It was scaled down, but it's only scaled down to about 300 to 400 square feet, which is still 20 to 25% larger than the largest house in its vicinity. And so I think I'm still opposed to the project from that perspective. Also, any time you have to remove trees to, in the area, it's also definitely a negative for me. So I'm just here to voice my vote against the project for those reasons, and I hope that you consider the neighbors' concerns, because I believe they're all in line with mine. And thank you for your time.
I'm going to ask you, sir, probably the same question I'll ask others. You guys are intimately involved with this project. You know it, you realize it, you know the area. You were probably also present last time we all met, or probably saw the film. What would you recommend as far as a possible design solution? You mentioned that you think he has the right to build, which obviously he does. So what are some solutions that you think would be acceptable as a direct neighbor?
Well, first of all, I think the size of the house should be more in line with the size of the homes in the area. I have a family of 5, right, including myself. We live comfortably in a 1,450 square foot home. The only reason why you'd want to build a home that large, in my opinion, is because of where the market is today. Maybe from an economic standpoint, makes sense to do. I think, given where he wants to build, if it was a wide open lot and you had certain parameters, I can understand, and I have no say in that. But there's a cost aside from the monetary cost to build. There's a cost to, to the neighbors in terms of the trees and sort of what we bought into when we purchased our homes. And I can sacrifice a little of that because I believe we live in a community, so it's not just all about me. But it has to be within reason. And I believe even at most, maybe a 2,000, 2,100 square foot home in that lot, in that area, given the impact of the trees, that's probably borderline in terms of on the outside, but 2,700 to me is still too large. I think the second story also is probably not appropriate given how the surrounding homes are laid out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Joe Neri. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Hi, Joe Neary, owner of 1711 Sombra. It's on the same side of the street. I've been there since 1990. I basically oppose the project completely, but I realize he does have a right to build on property that's his. But everybody speaks of the 2785 square feet, and it's really, you've got to remember, there's also a 425 square foot garage, so that's like 33,210 square feet. And it's going to drop that, I call it a McMansion, into a small little area on a dead-end street that's the size of an alleyway. And it's not a cul-de-sac. The trash trucks, and I think I have a trash truck backing up, that's what they do. They back up every time they come there, and there's 2 trucks, so they always do that. And that's how small it is. And you go to the next slide.
Turn off the
Oh, sorry. Go back to the second slide.
This one?
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a one before that? Yeah. Okay, that's the other thing that makes this a unique, certain situation, special circumstances. And I know that you guys probably had never come across this before, but that is a planter that's not on the city map, and it's there, and it's out about 14 feet. And then the other side, there's about 15 feet to get by there. So it squeezes it down to even smaller alleyway. Now, why do I say that? Because they're going to drop a McMansion in there, and it's 4 bedrooms. So I've been in Glendale for a long time. When you have something this big, that it creates cars, it creates a lot of chaos in there, and it's entirely too big. And I know one of the things that you guys talk about is compatibility with the neighborhood. And there's 7 houses on Sombra, and they're all like less than, well, I did the average, including the one bigger house that's also on the corner of Sombra and Kenyatta, and it's somewhere around 1,350 square feet is what we've been living with. And now all of a sudden you're going to put basically a Walmart down the end of the street. And it's not necessarily Walmart, but a McMansion at the end of the street, which I think is the worst place to put it. Now, you say, well, what else can we do? Well, the size and the mass, that does not match and you've been down there, does not match that street. And it's chaos. And if you go to your next slide, next one, yeah. Go back or keep going. No,
This is everything.
everything?
Yep.
Okay, okay, just leave the last slide up, that one.
This one?
Yeah. Anyway, it's also, there's no sidewalks. It's an entrance to the parkway, and this is what I see every day. People in strollers and kids walking and driving their bikes down the middle of that street. And it's super narrow, and you cannot turn around without going into somebody's driveway if it's available, and that's what happens. So my thing is the mass, it's too big. It's way too big.
Time limit, sir.
Okay.
We're gonna have a long night here, so we're
Okay.
gonna limit the time as the bell rings. We're gonna move on to the next speaker, but thank you so much. Next speaker is Paul Kazanjian.
You just stepped outside the door. So.
No, we'll come back. Next is Jay Carter. There you go. You had kind of scribbled the last.
I'm sorry about
That's
that,
all right.
Mr. Simonian. My name is Jake.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for meeting tonight. My name is Jay Carter Tutwiler. I live in the house behind the project at 1720 Willow Drive. Vista, you can just scroll through the floor, please. This is outside my dining room. This is outside my kitchen, and that's outside my backyard. And then that is outside my living room. So I am obviously opposed to this from a privacy concern, please. And the rest of the other complaints that have been and will be addressed tonight are the same that I have. But I would like to say that I do agree with Mr. Simonian in that when you squint and look at the old plans versus the new plans, I don't see what the difference is. So I'm a little confused as to why it's come this far. I think that it was pretty explicit what the problems were originally, and you're hearing the same, it's being addressed the same way. Otherwise, I think that you're going to be, it's all be reiterated over and over tonight. So as opposed to lengthening the meeting, I'll take any questions you may have.
I have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. George.
The driveway that's got this easement on it, is the neighbor that owns that property here? from
I
your
don't
village?
believe that they are.
Okay. That was-
And I'll ask what I asked the other gentleman in that, you know, the owner obviously has some rights in building. You guys have been involved with the project. You know how the situation and the orientation of the trees and the site affect the rest of the neighborhood. What would you think is a good compromise, or what would you suggest, or what sort of project would you support?
Well, sir, if it had to be a matter of compromise, then I would give you the same answer, which is the house should be smaller. But if you were to ask me my real opinion, I think that the way that this entire development came about with the untying of this lot, which was a mystery to me, like Phil, when I bought my house, we reached out to the previous owner who said, because I wanted to buy the property and preserve it as green space. I knew it couldn't be built on. That had always been the assertion whenever I discussed it, and it wouldn't be something I'd be interested in. But the previous owner told me specifically that the lot could not be untied, and therefore the property could not be sold unless I bought the house as well. Now, this is the same thing that Phil heard, this is what our realtors heard, this is what the escrow agents told us, so I took it as face value that, all right, it can't be split up. These people came into the neighborhood, bought the house, started telling everyone in the neighborhood what they were going to do in terms of we're going to build a bunch of houses, which kind of created this sort of fury about what's occurring now. And the next thing I knew, the lot was untied. I believe there has been another easement that's been granted to the neighbors who were willing to give up their driveway for this construction. I don't know if that's even on the site map that this easement has been recorded, which is another consideration for the board to maybe look into. And in seeing this tree impact report, I don't know that there is a compromise really that makes sense, except that, yes, make it smaller, but perhaps it's something that should just remain the way it is.
Yeah, well, the reason why I asked, and I think you kind of answered it, but size is very subjective. You know, make it smaller or make it bigger. It's
Correct.
a subjective thought, because what might be big to one person might seem small to another.
That's what the owner. That's what the owner applicant told me. He thought it was. He thought it was already too small as it was.
That's right. So,
But however, then I would say maybe
the
then.
objective way that we're looking at it is, well, how do you reorient it or how do you place it on a site to minimize that impact?
Are you talking to these specific plans?
No, of course, that's why we're here.
Then I don't believe there's a way to do it. I believe that if it was one story, it would be a step in the right direction. I believe then you would start to see maybe there'd be a happier feeling amongst everyone that it's going to be some reasonableness, which is the word you keep hearing. But in terms of this project, I'm not an architect, so I couldn't tell you with any certainty.
So in your vision, the way you're interpreting it as an appropriate is instead of a two-story or one-story?
I think it would start to address my privacy concerns, which I believe I understand that is part of my purview to
You've
be able to.
answered my question.
Okay,
But
thank you, sir.
if I can add something.
Sure.
You were talking initially about the trees and a one story to get to the size where it's doable or livable. You're going to impact more trees because now the footprint is going to get larger.
Well, that's
So-
if it's going to be big, but all right.
So it's,
I don't know that I would agree with that, only because I believe Mr. Simonian originally had said that there should be a more thoughtful way of coming and utilizing the position of the trees. So I think that's already, thought that had already been addressed.
cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. The next speaker is Yvonne Markowski. Good
All
evening.
these names.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Yvonne Marchowski. I live at 1720 Willow Drive as well. We are the house that backs Mr. Hall's property. And we are the ones that got our neighbors together to hire Cy Sandberg to look at the tree report. We have a tree on your list. It's tree number 12. And it is cabled. It is one of the most mature trees on the lot. And it is cabled to tree number 9, which is going to be removed. And I'm very concerned. That tree hangs right over my family room. We are the ones that paid to have it cabled in 2008 for the previous owners to A, preserve it, and B, make sure it didn't fall down. So I haven't seen anything in the tree impact report to address how that tree is going to be handled. And I'm also, again, pro-tree, Verdugo Woodlands. That's why we all live there, and that's why we decided to try and rebut the original tree impact report and maybe have the board put some more significant restrictions on what kind of equipment they can get in there and what measures are going to be put in place to mitigate for the trees that are going to remain. $16,000 to remove 3 trees doesn't seem like very much for trees, especially in a neighborhood that is pro-tree. With regards to the scaling and mass of the house, Carter has addressed that with you guys. The second story stares right into our backyard, right into our public rooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, family room. So we would prefer a 1-story home. I would have also liked to see, it was such a beautiful, pristine lot, a more architecturally interesting house that brought the outside in and put something there that really maximized the impacts of a lot like that. Those are my remarks. Do you have any questions?
Do we have any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I move on to the next speaker, do we happen to have a contour map, topographic map?
I can try to pull one up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next speaker is Myrna Stanley.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Myrna Stanley, Verdugo Woodlands West Homeowners Association. We appreciate the reduction in floor area and the fact that the house was pulled away a bit from the house to the rear on Willow. But the issue with our homeowners association is one of compatibility. While a 2,700 square foot home is not large by today's standards, this house is on the wrong lot. When you look at the homes on this very narrow lot, and I spoke with engineering today, and they said the street at its widest is 24 feet, and that's with the exception of that tree that's pulling out. But a single-story home with maybe a half a story atop that didn't impact the canopies and nor the people to the rear would be much better and more in keeping with there's a need for smaller homes in Glendale, and specifically the Verdugo Woodlands. And I understand this is an investment property, but I think he'd get his money out of it with a smaller, even though this home was a smaller footprint. So I would appreciate that, and whatever you do, whenever this concludes, I would sure appreciate if you would address the fact that this project needs a staging plan, because I heard what they've done with the neighbor to the rear as far as the driveway. That's not going to, can you imagine a big truck with lumber and cement and backing out? It's just, this is a very difficult project, and I appreciate it, but it has to be changed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to return to Paul Kazanjian.
I can't find him.
Oh. Going once, going twice.
Yeah, sorry. But can I speak for him?
I'm sorry, Mr. Simonian, I'm
Yes.
trying to pull it up right now, but the applicant did point out that the elevation points should be on the first sheet of the plans. I think it would be up on the site plan as
Yeah,
well.
all site plans have elevations. It's a flat lot, so there's flat elevations, there's no contours.
Just bear with me while I try to pull it up on
Okay.
the.
Mr. Arsen, Kathy June? Yurka. Good evening. Sorry.
That's okay. Hi, my name is Kathy Yurka, and
Oh, I see. That's an RC.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. I was actually here to speak on a different project, but I'm a resident of the Verdugo Woodlands, and hearing what some of the neighbors have said and thinking about how I would feel if this were going on, not just immediately next to me, but on my street. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I understand the point that Chairman Simonian made about size being subjective, but I think that question is mediated somewhat by the issue of compatibility, which Myrna Stanley just brought up. It's not just that this will be substantially the largest house in that small house neighborhood by quite a bit, even if it's dropped down from 3,000 feet, but that will become a standard for the new compatible. And I've seen that happen over and over in Glendale, where it's, something is at the, not even really at the margins of compatibility, but you can say, well, there's 1 2-story house behind it and 2,200 square feet, 2,700, it's not that much. Now suddenly you've got a neighborhood of small houses with the house that's 2,700. And what does that do to the projects that come down the line? So I just wanted to say that because it's something that I've been concerned about in general, that we have compatibility and then we have up to code. And I think compatibility somehow drops out a bit in these conversations. I know you're paying a lot of attention to it, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure the neighbors are. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have any questions for Mr. Robert Hall, the owner, or Mr. Margosian, the consultant, and is it necessary for them to come up?
Speaker card from the public.
Okay. Just to follow up on my question, do you guys have any reason for them to come up?
I would like to ask some questions about the easement, just
From the
to
owner.
staff, and then
Oh,
or to
Mr. Greg Manucci? Good evening.
Greg Minucci. I'm going to be moving into the area, so I did not put my address of the home. I don't know if they would come after me or what, but I'm in favor for the home. I don't see what the big deal is. I'm in escrow. I'm going to be closing in 2 weeks. My wife and I were driving through the neighborhoods all the time, especially at night. There were kids there smoking, drinking, doing stuff. Didn't think that's appropriate, so putting this home there would be a good idea.
You're closing escrow on this property or?
No, a different home in the neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
But that's all I wanted to say.
Great.
I have a question. I'm sorry. You saw people hanging out at the end of this particular street?
This. See, I grew up here. I played soccer there at the park, and I know it opens up into the park there.
Yeah.
So when you go down the street, there's like a kind of like a dead end or a cul-de-sac, and so right there in the
I'm familiar.
wooded area, whatever, there's a group of 4 or 5 guys drinking, smoking. I don't know what they were doing, but So, and that's a couple of times. Okay, it's not just one time, it was a couple of times. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Robert Hall. And you had some questions for staff first.
Yeah, so I want to understand this easement issue, because is the easement simply for, well, let me answer the question very broadly. What is the easement? What kind of easement is it?
The applicant did submit a full title report at the last round, which I have a copy of, and there was an easement recorded for the driveway. And it's noted on those plans as well, and the copy's coming.
Which is a new, this is a new easement.
No, it's a perpetual access easement.
Okay.
Which drawing is it labeled on?
On the site plans, on the top left corner, it should say existing driveway easement.
And so this is the neighbor's driveway, and then that is a easement off of the neighbor's driveway.
Basically, they can use it for access.
Got it, from the neighbor's
Without,
driveway.
yeah, without that easement, that neighbor in particular would end up with a non-conforming driveway width. It was something we wanted to verify just prior to bringing this to you to ensure that there would be no major issues. And that's why we asked for the full title.
Was that
report.
property to the left, the original house that this vacant property was part of, that was split?
The permit records don't indicate those were all one lot. What I can tell from having reviewed the title report and the history, it appears that those 4 lots always had the same ownership, and they were probably tied through the assessor for tax purposes. The original track map, which I can also provide a copy of, shows them as 4 separate lots. The permit records for 1719 Stoneborough Drive do show the lots 3 and 4. This property in particular is lots 1 and 2.
Okay, so at some point, these 4 properties were part of one property. At some point, they were split, and this driveway that's accessing the neighbor's property is actually encroaching onto the subject property, and, because this is the property line, right?
Yeah, so this part right here,
This is,
this part right here, and this has been added to that to first deal with the width issue here,
okay?
to allow that to be conforming. I'm assuming that's for turning around.
Just if I may, from a planning
So,
standpoint,
so
the
is
split
the
may not be.
easement,
Sorry. Yeah.
is the easement for the benefit of this vacant property, or is it for the benefit of the property next
The
door?
vacant property.
The vacant property?
No,
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 it's for the
it's for-
neighbor. It's for the neighbor to egress and ingress for their garage.
Okay, and so if you wanted to use that driveway to bring lumber in, you couldn't, because you don't have the right to use it. The other neighbor has the right to use it and encroach onto your property. Is that correct?
Right, but I got the okay from them to use it, because there we had the concerns of how we were going to bring in a material, so.
And
That's
was
all.
this a formal agreement that was put into an
Well, I'm friends
easement that was recorded against properties, and has it been formalized, or is it based on a handshake?
I'm friends with them, so,
It's a handshake.
yes,
Got it.
that's correct.
You had some questions.
Yes. So now that you volunteered that you're friends with him, I have a question. It's my recollection, and I didn't have my notes from the last meeting, but it was my recollection that we discussed suggesting that the reconfiguration be looked at, make it an L-shaped, single story. I believe we also made mention of the possibility of having a detached garage. So my questions are the following. Since the last meeting, have you looked at reconfiguring it from the design to an L-shaped single-story design, or some other type of single-story design?
Well, I left the concerns of that up to Craig, but we're trying to keep, with the way it is now, my son who's gonna live there would have no backyard for his kids, even though he does have a park to play in. But, if you take all those trees into consideration, there'd be no areas for, kids to play in because of all the trees.
The lot is how large?
9,000.
9,000. The footprint of the house is 3,400?
But you take in all those trees into consideration.
Footprint's about 1,500 plus the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second.
So, okay. Thank you. Did you look at having a so the same reason is you wanted to have a yard without trees,
Well,
trunks in it, and that's why we didn't look at the L shape or a house. Was that? what I'm
I don't
getting?
remember hearing
I mean,
the
a
shape
garage.
thing last meeting. I didn't hear that part.
Okay.
No,
I'll ask you.
no, I rather us speak to the owner, and then we'll, of course, call you up, sir. We can't have two people up here, I'm sorry.
So, okay, I just wanted to understand why we're looking at what we're looking at from a design perspective.
I got a question on all this. I'm sensing that there might be some miscommunication here. We have a 9,300 square foot lot.
Yep.
And as I'm looking at these spawn elevations, we have, 972, 972, 973, 974. So you basically have a flat lot.
Yep.
And then we come over to the canopy plan that has the trees, and these are the individual trees, and you're removing these three because you're putting a home right here. Now, say you're already removing these trees and these trees go away, and you do an L-shaped plan. Imagine a home right here, where instead of taking your second floor, which is this, you're putting it next to this. So imagine right here, you're doing this. You still have all this as your yard, and you still have this. And so that's what I don't understand is you would still get a yard. In fact,
I gotta read that one back to Craig because I'm not, we talked about how it would be the best way and then to go with your guys' recommendation. That's kind of what we did instead of I don't think the recommendation was to redesign the whole house.
I think it very much was.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, okay. Like I said, I'm sensing a big miscommunication here, and so that's why I'm bringing it up. That's my gut feeling, and I think the more we're talking about it, the more it's becoming apparent that it is.
Well,
The way the,
Yeah, wait.
yeah, just if I could just,
I apologize.
and we're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse here, in that we're talking about our points before the public session is closed, but I think you should know, as the owner, you're spending money on
Sam,
your
lots, yeah.
consultants, time and
Yeah.
effort and all this. And that's why I kind of asked for you to maybe come up at the end when it's the rebuttal stage, because just so we're getting the big picture here. The idea is you have the right to build, you should be able to build. And how do you come up with a situation or an orientation of a house where you're not impacting everybody and it happens to be a compatible design? And I think there is a solution there. And our points last time at the last design review board were very major. There were major points, as in redesign the entire building so it's not a square two-story, spread it out. And that was the discussion, and I don't think that message has been transcribed to you somehow. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
Well, I understand, yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to make it, well, I gotta leave it to Craig, because
Fair enough,
he's the one
fair
that
enough. And
designed.
he's up next, he's got a rebuttal period, and that's why
Right,
he's
right.
up next. I'm sure he wants to come up.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can we
Yes.
have the same questions, have the
Just if-
designer answer? it?
If, I think the arborist has some thoughts on this, if you would like to hear.
Sure. Maybe now's the best time before the rebuttal?
Maybe after the rebuttal.
After the
then
rebuttal, and
second
then we'll
rebuttal
close.
if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes, gentlemen. So, in regards to the L-shaped plan, I think you said it yourself. You'd be losing 3 trees either way, but you'd have a much larger footprint of a building, impacting more root structure. It would actually look larger from the street because it's a second story, and the canopies are all remaining around the perimeter. If you look at the perimeter, all the trees in the front are staying, all the trees in the back, just those 3 center ones are leaving. You actually really won't even see that much of the second story. The top left rendering that you see right there is actually the view from the street with the tree in place. So I think you would actually be doing a detriment to the neighborhood if you created a larger one-story structure.
Okay, but one of the reasons that I think we were pouring a one-story structure. And I remember one of my specific comments was the pruning, the trimming back.
Correct.
I can't remember the numbers right now, but the two
Right.
trees that are marked in green on the report would have been reduced greatly.
That they are
or
reduced greatly
completely,
now, right?
Right. And you would have much less concerns for privacy. Now, I commend you because what you've done is you've come back and you've said, okay, that balcony we wanted, we're going to take that out so we don't have a public space for privacy. That we're not overlooking that. We're not overlooking that you did that and that you've reconfigured so that it's private space in there, bedrooms and such, so that you don't have the privacy issue from the second story. But one of the reasons we were going towards a single story was one, the less impact on the tree canopy having to be trimmed back to accommodate the house on the trees that were just going to remain, and also give you some guidance as to a possible solution for privacy. You chose a different route, which was to take a balcony out. And I think that's a good thing that you didn't come back with the balcony, because it does alleviate some of those privacy issues. But we also still now are dealing with the mass issue with the driveway in the front. We'll talk about that, but that's where I think we were going.
Well, I would say if you look at, I was in the meeting and 5 of you guys said we actually don't have a problem with the 2-story. There were some recommendations for 1.5 stories, but the majority definitely said 2-story was not out of the realm of possibility given the site constraints.
Yes.
So, and the detached garage was actually never discussed.
If you had shifted the masses,
right, and which we did.
I don't have a problem.
Right, and we did, right? We brought the garage forward as Mr. Simone.
No, we weren't talking about
May
pushing
I make
back.
a suggestion? I think let's use this rebuttal period for the architect to have some thoughts against what the public has said. I don't think we want to have a cross communication. As I said, we've put the cart a little bit in front of the horse here. So I'd like us to conclude the public portion, and then we'll actually say our thoughts. And I know the arborist needs to chime in as well. We've already been at this for over an hour. So with that, sir, please go ahead and conclude your rebuttal, and we'll.
I will say simply
Take it under
that the concerns of the neighbors are absolutely valid. Construction will be difficult. That is absolutely true. But that is going to happen regardless of the building size. If it's an 800 square foot detached garage, you're still going to have a cement truck and a lumber truck. If it's a 3,500 square foot house, you're still going to have those vehicles. So if you're saying, if the reasoning is that it's going to be an imposition on the neighborhood, then no building can be built there. And you're taking away the property owner's right, which obviously is not something you want to do. In terms of neighborhood compatibility, there's a house, unfortunately it's not directly adjacent to us, but 1726 Willow. So not 22, not 20, 26. And it is 3,129 square feet without a garage. It's 2-story. It abuts the park just like we do. It is a very close representation of what the actual neighborhood is as you get closer to the park. The homes get bigger. They are indeed 2 stories. We're not even the biggest house within a 300-foot radius. So there is absolutely precedent for a house this size, especially now that we've taken it down to 2,700. Again, we are leaving all the perimeter trees. Only the center 3 are leaving. We've reduced the amount of trimming necessary per our arborist. The city's arborist also agrees that this is an acceptable plan. They have some conditions regarding the subbase of the driveway and the walkway. We will absolutely meet those as part of our approval process. That's all I have. If you have any more questions, feel free.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this case that hasn't already spoken? Thank you very much. We're going to close the public portion. Yes? No, I know. That's not part of the minutes, okay? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make the comment and put on record that in general with these development projects, especially on vacant lots, that minimizing soil disruption and leaving as much undisturbed soil on the property for tree roots to develop into is our preference. So I recognize that there would be staging and vehicle access and probably in that northwest corner regardless, but building especially a foundation onto that portion, I think we'd prefer the smaller footprint would be better for forestry as far as preserving the trees on site.
Hence the complexity. Every department has a different preference. Do we have a question for the arborist? would you like to go first this
Sure.
evening? Yes.
Why not?
He was already looking at me. He was ready to go.
So
I was looking away.
when I got the packet and I was reviewing the old versus the new, I felt kind of what Mr. Simonian was saying initially, like it's almost the same. Not much had changed. I didn't see any dramatic change because we spoke about the L shape and Mr. Simonian or some other members mentioned the one story, and I didn't have an issue with a second story as long as the mass on the second floor shifts in and kind of blends in within the trees. As if you look at the upper left rendering, it starts happening now. I don't know if that's accurate or if that's the actual tree. So you start seeing that the second floor blends in and you don't see it. So I don't have an issue with the second floor, and I think I commend the designer. He did major stuff like losing the balcony is a big thing, reducing the square footage by about 10%. I would have liked it if you had gone down 500 square feet. I think it still can lose a couple hundred square feet and be in the 2,400 square feet range. It'll be more. But to tell you the truth, I was also thinking that going and developing in that area where the open space is a good idea to shift the mass, even if we do 2-story or a story and a half where you have like one level, L shape, and half a story on top, that would be fine. But after hearing what the arborists say, I would stay away from that, and he's the professional when it comes to preserving the trees. So as it stands, I don't think I have a problem with the project.
Mr. Charchi?
Okay.
Or would you like me to go next?
No, I'll go.
Is that good?
So this was a very difficult project. I've been to the project site. The project site is one that I would agree with the neighbors and would have believed a realtor, and I would have believed the city or assumed that it was not buildable. There's a lot of oak trees, and there's some nature and so forth. But at the same time, property owners have property rights. So you have to find this balance. The previous design had too much of an impact on the trees, and I was not in support of it. I wanted it to be redesigned. The applicant has redesigned the project. The redesign options that they have chosen go to addressing some of the privacy issues, but at the same time, I'm sure that if I was a neighbor, I would think that they're not going far enough, because even though there's no balcony that someone can look out from, which is something that we can address as the DRB, there are private spaces that have windows that are probably uncomfortably too close if you're a neighbor. However, from our guidelines, since they're for private space, we don't comment on that. So I want the neighbors to understand that if someone's in their bedroom, we don't have a rule that says that that's now something that we can look at from a privacy perspective. If that was a hallway, it would be different. The hallway in this particular design is facing the street, and actually the tree canopy, to be more precise. Now, I also balance it with our recommendation to consider other design elements, such as a single-story design or a split-level design. And here is where is the difficult part for me to support the project. The house is being designed with all the conveniences that you would want to have, such as an attached garage where you can drive in, walk into your home, which is a great feature, right? I don't have that at my house, and I always think to myself, it would have been nice to have that, but I don't, because of the style of my particular home. Here, you also have a unwillingness, I think, to consider doing something at that open space to preserve, basically a lawn space. And so, have we gone as far as we need to address the conformity of this particular design for this neighborhood? This is the difficult part for me. It is a bigger home. It is not the biggest in the neighborhood. There are many examples just south of here, like 2-3 streets south here that abut the wash, that are huge. If you want to talk McMansions, those are huge. But we're looking at this particular lot. And this particular lot with its limitations, I think this house is still a little massive. I agree with Mr. Bellion. There's ways, I think, to shave off a little bit. And if we did those things and we took another look at it, I think I could be in support. Right now, I'm literally right on the fence, and I want to see what Mr. Simonian has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chartier. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. It's certainly been about 4 months since we heard this last, so it's somewhat fresh in our minds because at times 2 or 3 years goes by when a project is heard, or sometimes less than that, but it's rarely that it's within 4 months. So we do remember the details, but it's always nice that you guys filled in the minutia of it. When you get these infill properties and these built-out neighborhoods, it gets more and more difficult to develop them over time. This property might not have been as difficult to develop 15, 20 years ago, but with different protocols, different restrictions, and different procedural matters that come into play, it gets difficult to develop these kind of properties. And in order to develop them, you really need to work with the community, and you need to come up with a compromise where people feel as though they were able to make less of an impact. But at the same time, it's a compromise, so maybe no one's happy, but at the same time, that's what it really took. I'm not as concerned, nor do I think it's as big of an issue as really the mass of the home as it relates to the street. I think the biggest issue here is how the second story affects the neighbors. I really do think that's the root of it here, is how does that second floor play in and affect the quality of life of the surrounding neighbors. And there's many situations that come up in front of this board where it's literally impossible to add on to a home without going to the second floor. You have these narrow lots where you have a driveway on one side, you have a setback on another side, 50-foot lot wide. Where do you add? You can't. The only way you could add to it is go to the second floor. And then there's situations like this where you have a blank slate to work with, and you have a lot of flexibility. The hard part of our job is that different departments, such as the arborist, planning department, engineering department, the general public, the neighbors, the applicant, the contractor, everybody has an opinion as to why it should be a certain way, and everybody has a really good reason as to why it should be a certain way. And our job is to see through that fog and to really understand the root of the problem and try to take in a grain of salt, let's say, a certain comment that is important to one department, but if you try to satisfy that one department, you're really causing a bigger issue with everything else. So in this specific scenario, we have the arborist that's saying, well, you want to disturb as little as the site as possible. True. The more of the site you disturb, the more of an impact you're going to have on the trees. True. However, we're already getting rid of three trees, and we're already trimming a whole bunch of trees. And if you look at, you know, the house as it's placed here, it's very close to the trunks of these guys, of these trees, which are staying but are being trimmed back. And so if you add a home over here, true, you're going to impact these trees, but when you look at it holistically, you're impacting these trees just as much in this current location as you would over here. So if you just take these comments and face value, it leads you down one direction, but if you look at things holistically, you start to kind of realize that, well, although it's absolutely true, how does that play into the bigger picture? I do believe that this site could be developed, should be developed, and can be developed. But I do think it should be developed as a one-story and perhaps a very small portion of a two-story, if even that. And I think whatever that occurs on this site over that is going to impact everybody else, and it's going to either get appealed or whatever the case might be, it's going to cause an inconvenience, and it's going to be something that could have been avoided. I do think that you'll be very happy with a one-story, and it could work. It's a perfect site for it. I do believe that the architect and designer or engineer just does not want to do that for many reasons, and he probably feels very strongly about that. And I think that's what our job is to illustrate our opinion or as to what's compatible. And I feel very strongly that it should be designed different. And that's okay. People could have difference of opinion. That's what it's all about. So I can't support the project in its current configuration and layout, and I'm even hesitant to just try to prescribe more conditions because I thought we were pretty specific last time, or at least I was. And so with that, I don't think we should belabor this any longer. We have two board members, one more in support, one on the fence, so it's really up to you guys to try to come up with a condition or a motion, and if it passes, I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to say return for redesign. So with the amount of time that we've spent on this, and we have two more, if someone wants to entertain a motion, then we move forward.
If I can indulge the chair for 2 minutes. We heard from our city arborist that the footprint being enlarged would be more of a detriment to the trees that are on the property than not. We have two full tree reports, one prepared by the homeowners, neighbors, excuse me, and one commissioned by the applicant. The impact on the trees, according to the experts, is within acceptable ranges based on this footprint. But we heard from the city arborist that if you expand it, that's probably going to be more detrimental. That was one of the points that resonated with me, and I think it resonated with Mr. Belknap. So I think we do need to maybe think about whether or not that weighs in, because if they are going to go to a single story, I'm assuming they're not going to want a 1,500 square foot single story. Maybe that's all that is reasonable for this lot, but that's where I think we're going to run into an issue. So if there's any comments on that, great. If not,
I agree with you. I think the footprint as it stands, it's okay. It just we need to scale back the second floor further. Just reduce the mass a little bit, maybe on the first and the second floor. And if we can condition that, we can. At least that's just my thought. Because going to a new footprint, it might trigger now they come back with a new footprint that impacts 6 trees. Now what do we do then? We're gonna send them to redesign again and say, oh, compact your footprint, and
No, I
so
understand.
that's just my feeling.
That's why I said it's kind of up to you guys to draft a motion that works.
Can, do you want to take a stab at a motion?
Go for it.
Well, I think we have to, there's some conditions. Can we have a reading of the conditions?
The current conditions for recommendation for approval?
Yes.
Okay. So there are 3 conditions, 1 consideration. The first condition was just on the renderings, and on one rendering and on the site plan, you show there's a driveway and a walkway, and there's a separation between regarding the oak trees and landscaping, and that be maintained. Just because of the discrepancy on the drawings, we asked to add that as a condition. The second condition is to only use 1 roof pitch, preferably the 3 and 12 at all roof areas. That may help with the massing issues with this lower pitch. The third condition has to do with compliance with the urban forestry's tree protection measures dated October 19th. And the consideration that staff is recommending has to do with the easterly facade and wrapping the roof form along that facade to avoid the awkward termination points you see at the garage and at the rear. On the first floor, that's a consideration. That portion has limited visibility, if any, from the street. So, you know, that would be up to you how you feel about that.
Okay, so in that reference, then I want to direct your attention to the October 19th, 2016 Urban Forestry Report, which, in reference to, I think, trees 5 and 7, which are not slated to be removed. I'm sorry, 2 and 3. In reference to the driveway, which I had commented on earlier, what's the width of that driveway now?
I believe it's at a minimum. It should be on the plan.
9 feet, and then spanning out right before the entry
It
point?
shows 9 feet.
Okay, so a question for urban forestry. Is that acceptable? Provided your comments on page 3, number 1, where it says forestry does not approve the current driveway width as proposed.
Yeah, I believe that in the updated comments that we said that that was acceptable.
Well,
The shrink in the width.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Updated comments are not part of the conditions, so do we make the updated comments part of the conditions then?
Yeah, we can do that. And we also heard a condition about pavers on grade, which we could add as a condition.
Sorry? Pavers on grade?
For the driveway.
Would be less of an impact on the roots. So in the spirit of time, was that all the conditions that staff had?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys want to take a stab out of a big picture, see if you have an agreement before we get to the minutia of inches and feet?
The thing is that I believe I can support a 2-story design with Mr. Billion's concerns of scaling it back. I don't want to prescribe specific inches and feet. I think that's not appropriate, but I think there should be a mass reduction. I think there should be a reduction to reduce the canopy cutting, pavers on grade, and inclusion of the updated arborist report are fine. However, I feel like I need to see it. I feel like I need to see it before, given how sensitive this lot is. You know, I don't want to prescribe, say it's okay, and then not know what's going to actually be built. So again, I'm literally like, I hate to be on the fence. I keep everybody here this late in the day, but I'm literally like, torn, because it is not what I expected to see coming back. But at the same time, I see that they've tried to address it, and I can't go against not 1 but 2 arborist reports that say that it's doable. So I'm going to leave it to my colleague if you have a motion and a full, any additional conditions. Let's see what,
Yeah,
addressing the issue of the second story is what I'm having difficulty addressing as a condition.
I feel the same way. We have two arborist reports, so we don't want to go against it and come back with a new footprint. And I see Mr. Charchian and Mr. Simoni's comments, and I agree with you. It's kind of tough to say reduce the second floor, and they go ahead and reduce it 50 square feet, and they come back with they don't come back. They build the same exact box that we see in front of us, and then what do we do then? So. But if we don't do that, like, it's going to be a return for redesign, I guess.
Which, given the amount of public interest here, is probably a fair decision if you go there.
So we can do that.
Again, can we get a motion out on?
I don't,
I could pass the gavel and make a motion.
pass the gavel.
I move to return the project for redesign with the conditions as stated by staff, also coupled with the spirit of the conditions from the previous hearing.
So we'll have the previous conditions and 3 additional conditions. 1, to reduce the mass of the project, particularly at the second floor, to include pavers on grade at the driveway, and then to include the updated arborist report as part of the submittal package.
And since it's my motion, I'm adding a condition which would be to explore with staff 2 or 3 one-story schemes early on while you're assessing the site planning and orientation of the building onto the site. And if it's possible, and if it's feasible, to then pursue a one-story design.
Okay, now is there concurrence on that?
That's my motion.
Okay.
I'm not going to second.
Okay.
Am I chairing right now?
Yes.
You've got
So I don't see concurrence from Mr. Billion either. So do you want to give it another stab, maybe without that condition?
pass the gavel back.
Pass the gavel back, sorry, formalities.
Again, I'm leaning towards not a very small prescriptive kind of a condition of reducing mass of this building. I think overall, if you reduce it even by 100 feet on square feet or 150 on a second, it's still the same thing.
No, I totally agree with you, but going to a single story, you're not reducing the footprint, you're increasing it.
That's right.
Because they don't want 1,000 square
That's right.
feet, single story.
and I
So
guess-
that's the problem I'm having with the single story.
And I think my direction on it, since it's an interesting topic, to discuss, is that when we're building these homes, they're permanent. I mean, they're gonna be around for 100 years. And some of these trees might catch certain diseases and go bad, or they might fall down, or something might happen. But what we're building is very permanent. And so I always kind of look at, I take the arborist point into consideration, but I also look at the overall picture of general site planning and how can you design something that's next to the park, in this kind of a cul-de-sac area where you're not gonna be as impactful. And if, you know what, if we end up planting 4 trees instead of 3, but we end up with a less of a massing of a building, so be it. As far as the general weighing of the big design factors that go into my decision-making, I'm willing to live with it. It is what it is. And so what is a more permanent, good, compatible design on the long run for the next 50 to 100 years? That's my approach. So I do agree with you. It's going to impact maybe more of the trees. And I'm just saying I don't place as much of an importance on that in this specific scenario.
And you know what, I might agree with you. The only problem is if they lose 6 trees the next round, are we gonna send them back to I don't think it's fair for them to, are we gonna send them back for redesign? because now they're affecting 6 trees.
And again, to me, whether they're losing 3 or 5 trees, and if it's the right design, I'll support the project. And,
Me
and-
too.
Yeah, and so then there's no issue. If they come back and they've impacted more trees, but it's a one-story and they're impacting less of people's lives around them, I have a feeling everyone's gonna be for it.
Yeah, but we heard from the audience, from the participants, the neighbors, that trees are very vital, and it is a Verdugo Woodlands. And so,
Trees are vital, but when he's looking out his living room window and he's seeing look at them, they're green. They're seeing a
look,
big story pole.
yeah,
It's
I
different.
I feel the pain. I do. I live in the Verdugo Woodlands. I understand the neighborhood, and I understand privacy issues very much. But I'm not with you on where this is going on the one design. So unfortunately, if you have a motion, we'll try again. But I just can't.
Well, I have one motion out. So,
I believe that motion died.
Well, the motion actually is a return for redesign. You can go ahead and amend the conditions that you are recommending, because right now there is no second.
Well, there could be another motion for return for redesign, allowing the second story, reducing the mass, but not exploring the single story option.
which I'm not gonna.
Okay.
Right.
But not
So-
exploring the second story option?
Oh, no. I believe you all
Exploring the
agree that
second.
reducing the mass, especially at the second floor, seems like a given.
And that's a motion that I'm not gonna
Right.
So
Those
your
motions
motion
might gain
actually
some traction.
actually fails, so.
So I guess I'll make a motion for return for redesign with reducing with all the previous condition from the previous hearing and these conditions from this hearing, and mainly reducing the second floor dramatically. We're not talking 50 square feet because we're gonna send you back for redesign if you come back with.
Just so that the board knows, this is the second,
This-
correct. Essentially, by code, at this juncture, because this is a second review, you could deny the project altogether at this point. Under a unique set of circumstances, the board can then proceed to a third review, which would be a return for redesign in this case, but at that third review, you would either have to approve it with conditions or deny the project. There would be no return for redesign after the third.
Or approve without conditions. if they
Or
meet all
approve
your
without conditions.
With that scenario, does the applicant have to pay a fee for the redesign?
The applicant must, anytime that there is a return for redesign and a new application is submitted, a brand-new fee would have to be paid, yes.
Yeah, okay. Is there a second, Mr. Bellinger? No? Okay, I'm gonna try a stab at this.
Well, I still have the
Oh, I'm sorry.
gavel's back, so do you want a
Apologize.
second, Mr.?
I do not want to second that.
So we'll try again so that motion failed, we have a third motion.
Okay.
Sorry. So, board members, Chairman Simonian did not wish to pass the gavel, so, correct? Is that, so the motion
right,
made
so-
by Board Member Charchian fails?
No, I didn't
Okay.
make the motion.
Barb, Ben.
Sevan.
That's right.
Okay. I'm gonna take a stab at this. Motion for approval with the conditions from the last hearing, conditions from this meeting, addition of pavers on grade, implementation, amendment of condition number 3 of the staff report to also include the amended tree report and any conditions, recommendations that it contains, and an additional condition to significantly reduce the second story and take a holistic review of the exterior to reduce mass at the second story and surrounding the home, especially the portions facing the street. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote, Board Member Benlian.
Yes.
Board Member Charchian,
Yes.
Chair Simonian.
No.
2-1, motion passes.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next case
No.
is, Our next case is PDR 1526180 West Mountain. And Ms. Doherty is our case partner.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you, Chair Simonian. The applicant is proposing to demolish an existing fire-damaged 2,922 square foot, two-story house with an attached two-car garage, which was built in 1925 and remodeled in 1987 on an 11,885 square foot lot, and build a two-story, 3,185 square foot house with an attached two-car garage. The property is zoned R1, low-density residential. The proposed work includes a 1,875 square foot first floor, 1,310 square foot second floor, 450 square foot two-car garage. They're changing the location of the driveway from the east to the west side of the property. They're proposing new concrete block walls along the interior property lines, and they're proposing to change the architectural style. The existing property is located on West Mountain Street between East Alameda Avenue and Rangeview Drive, which is near the West City boundary in the El Miradero neighborhood. The project site is almost rectangular shaped and slopes down from the front property line to the rear, similar to other properties in the neighborhood on that side of the street, I should say. The total square footage of the lot is, as I mentioned, 11,885 square feet. The lots in the neighborhood range in size from 8,170 to 16,900, with an average lot size of 12,388 square feet. The homes in the neighborhood are 1 and 2 story with a mix of architectural styles and range in size from 1,319 to 6,053 square feet in size. The neighborhood has a mix of attached and detached garages and is characterized by well-maintained front yards with no sidewalks. As the original 5-room residence, as mentioned, and two-car garage were built in 1925. I mentioned that already. The house was built 35 feet from the front property line. There are no protected trees on the site or within 20 feet of the property. Staff believes that in terms of site planning, the proposed site plan is appropriate with any proposed conditions. The new house will be located in essentially the same location as the existing house, with the rear yard step down maintained. However, the pad will be raised so that the front entry will be level with the street. As such, staff is recommending a condition of approval that the house remains at the existing grade and better follow the topography to avoid unnecessary height. The front entry porch is set back 26 feet 3 inches from the front property line, with the garage set back 39 feet, keeping with the average neighborhood front setback of 25 feet. Garage locations vary in the neighborhood between attached and detached, so the staff feels the garage at the front of the house is appropriate for this neighborhood. The driveway paving will be new concrete pavers to match the style of the house. The existing trees will remain, and drought-tolerant landscaping will be provided. The front gates, staff believes, are too ornate and is recommending a condition of approval to simplify the design of the new gates. In terms of massing and scale, although the second story steps back from the first story, staff feels the house appears too boxy and massive. Staff recommends a condition of approval to incorporate additional breaks in the massing and the reduction of plate heights to improve the overall scale of massing. As mentioned, the property slopes slightly downhill, and the grade is proposed to be raised to create a flat pad. And as mentioned, staff is recommending condition of approval that house remains at the existing grade and follow the topography. The balconies at the front elevation may not meet building code for railing height. If required, staff recommends a condition that the relationship between the roof and balconies at the front facade be redesigned to eliminate the railing. Additionally, the rear porch columns, staff feel are too large, creating a sense of monumentality, and we are recommending a condition that the columns be reduced in size. In terms of overall design and detailing, staff pleased that the design of the proposed building and garage is appropriate for the neighborhood. The location of the entry provides an appropriate focal point. However, we feel that the front door is too ornate for the style of the house, and staff is recommending a condition that the door design be simplified. High-quality construction materials will include smooth finished stucco, aluminum-clad windows, wood windows, and concrete roof tiles. Based on this analysis, staff is recommending approval with conditions. Did you want me to go over the conditions? Which I pretty much already did. That's my presentation. Oh, we did receive a letter of support signed by about 29 people in the neighborhood, which you have received a copy today. You should have a copy. It looks like this. Uh-huh.
And we also want to alert the board to the site conditions are different than what appears on the drawings in terms of the amount of grading, possible need for retaining walls. So if in your deliberation you take that into consideration, it would be good for the project.
Well, on that note, Mr. Platt, can you fill us in with some details?
When we visited the site, it appears that they're raising the grade. We couldn't tell exactly, but possibly up to 3 feet to create a level pad that's level with the sidewalk. On this side of Mountain Street, the houses are below grade, below sidewalk level, and the front yards slope down toward the houses. We think by raising the pad, it's adding height to the project unnecessarily, and also looks like it would require some kind of retaining walls, at least along the, it would be the east property line probably, that aren't shown on the drawings.
I included photos of the story poles posted. They were on the...
Yes, we have
You
them
have
here.
those, okay.
I have a question. Actually, I received a call on this asking when it might be on the calendar. And I said, well, isn't there a notice out front? So in your visit, was it recent, and was there a notice out front?
Yes. Yeah, last week, and there was a notice, and I have photos of the site posted.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Couldn't remember.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Rodney Kahn. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening, Chairman, board members, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn. My offices are located on Brand Boulevard in the city of Glendale. Our property location is actually, it's very west. In fact, it's very close to the Glendale-Burbank city boundary line. I think we're just a few lots off. The existing house is actually, it's sitting there, but it's sat vacant for a number of years because of a fire that damaged it. And I think staff pointed out the existing house is a 2-story, 2,922 square foot house, and we're proposing a 2-story, 3,100 square foot house. So we're very close to the original square footage. The size of our house, the number of stories, the floor area ratio, the setbacks, all the other good stuff that you guys look at, we're very compatible with what's going on in terms of the neighborhood and the neighborhood average. To the credit of the property owner, there was a significant amount of neighborhood outreach which was conducted, and that is a credit, both along Mountain Avenue, and there's also a street directly south of us which is called Watson Street, and was referenced by staff that there was a petition, a letter of support, which I'm hoping that you guys got, with about 29 or 30 addresses and signatures And what's important about that is it's all within close proximity to our site. We didn't go far out. It was very, very close to us. And in part, what this letter of support read, and I'll be very brief, is that the proposed two-story house is well designed, incorporates adequate parking, generous landscaping, and open space, and requires no variances. Based on the information, the signatures, they say, we support our neighbor in the pursuit of his new single-family home and have no objection to the City of Glendale approving the requested design review application as submitted. We had the opportunity to review the staff report, to review the conditions of approval. There was one or two that I'll defer to Mr. Soroyan, our architect, that he'd like to speak to you on, the first being the existing grade. But in terms of the other conditions of approval, there are certainly items that we could address. So I'll conclude my remarks and turn it over to Varouj unless you have questions of me.
And so there's 5 conditions that staff has recommended. All of them except for condition number 1, which the architect is going to address, the applicant feels as though they could abide by.
We could address, that's correct, yes. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Khan?
No.
No? Thank you. Mr. Sarian. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Varouj Soroyan. I'm the architect of record. My office is at 128 South Kenwood here in Glendale. I don't want to go over the redundant issues. I try my best to address the issue that is a concern for the owner in regards to the location of the first floor grade actually. He specifically, every time that we had a meeting with each other in regard to the design and the changes and all that we were going through the process, he mentioned that he doesn't want to be lower than the sidewalk level. And that can be achieved by having some fill on the portion that is occupied at the footprint of the building, and with some 3 foot or so high retaining walls. That can be achieved. That will be to code. Of course, we have to do some grading and going through grading and submit retaining walls for approval, but it's a doable thing.
Okay. As far as the conditions of staff, number 2 to 5, Mr. Khan mentioned that you will be able to address them. And I assume you look through them in detail.
Yeah.
And you're quite confident that you'll be able to work with staff on these?
Well, the item number 2, the additional brakes, I don't know exactly what it means, because braking gear, over there, here and there, will impact the overall design, and it has to. It's not something that, in my opinion, at least, that we might be possible to do at a staff level. Probably we have to come back over here for a second look. But
I'm sorry, can you elaborate on that? Because Mr. Khan mentioned that if it's approved with these conditions, that you'll be able to work with them, and some of which will alter your design quite a bit, what I'm reading. So, but you're saying that you need to come back here?
No, I didn't mean that. But what I'm saying is that it is very easy to say that to additional brakes, by additional brakes which will impact the design. I don't know, we can be able to get approval from the staff. If it's okay with them, we will do it.
Let me rephrase the question in a different way.
Sure.
You guys, I'm sure, have had a lot of meetings, and I'm sure some of what staff is.
For 2 years, yes.
2 years. So over the 2 years, staff has made all these comments, and I'm sure repeatedly at different meetings. So
Yeah.
I think you have a pretty good idea of what staff wants. So if we say we're fine with these conditions, you're going to have to work with staff with those conditions. So you probably have a lot better idea of what those conditions, will result in than us, because you've been through those meetings and you know exactly what staff is looking for. So I guess I'm just asking, are you gonna be able to have those conversations with staff and abide by their direction?
With the exception of item number 1, I will try my best to address all the other issues and to come to a compromise with the staff.
Right.
Staff, of course, will look to the board for guidance to meet condition 2 if you choose to uphold it.
Which is
One.
incorporated.
What's that?
Condition 1 or 2?
Well, condition 1's kind of a separate issue in terms of the grade, and we'll see where you go with that. Condition 2 in particular, we're looking to kind of massage the form of the building to reduce the boxiness and mass.
So condition number 2 is incorporate additional breaks and lower the plate height to reduce the height and mass. Okay. Do we have any other questions for the architect? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I apologize. Do you happen to know what the height of the fire damaged home was?
Yeah, I think we have shown that in one of the adjacent building, existing building's height is 29 foot 6 inches.
Which drawing would that be on?
It's not a drawing. It's a separate page. I don't know if it's been incorporated with those plans or not, but
So the.
it's a separate. Okay, but I don't have a
and
copy
can-
with me.
and
But
is it possible if staff maybe puts a Google image of the historic? No, the historic photograph, because I think the one that is there now is of the fire burned building, or is that the building?
That's the building, yeah. The fire damage isn't that visible on the outside.
So my question, I'm so sorry.
This image that you see on the screen, this would be the 2008, so it looks like the window.
Yeah. So that height in the front, you're telling me that that's 29 feet?
no, not the front, but the height is measured from the lowest point to the highest point of the building, which is at the rear.
All right.
Yeah.
So the height of the proposed building in the front, I apologize.
26.7.
26.7.
But what is it at the rear?
Now, what is in the front? Because on the new design, in the existing building, you see the rear from the street, and it matters. But on the new design, you don't get to see the rear because the design is boxy and spans the length. So I'm trying to compare apples to apples as far as the massing in the front as to the portion that comes out as an L. So that's what I couldn't figure out was what's the height difference. Well, it seems extremely more massive to me.
If you look at
and front loaded.
Right, in this section, the rear height would be the 26.7 in the front plus, you know,
The 3 feet.
well,
Or whatever that is.
Looks like more, yeah, whatever that is, because that.
Okay.
Which is like maybe 15 feet.
Right.
And,
Excuse me, with all due respect, the height will be measured from the highest point of the building to that raised grade, not to the lower grade.
I'm not looking at it from a limitations perspective or anything like that. I'm looking from a mass perspective.
mass on street level.
From this viewpoint, I know.
Actually, if you look at the photos of the story poles, the story poles are actually attached to the
Oh,
house.
yeah, I know.
So that kind of helps you, yeah, okay.
Saw the story poles, here are the picture of the story poles, and that's my concern.
Because where the building hits the ground and you measure the height, as Mr. Soriano is saying, that's been artificially raised, right? To create a new
3
pad.
feet.
And I think that's what Mr. Charchi is trying to
Exactly.
get to.
Not only, well, we'll talk about it then, but those are my concerns.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There'll be a rebuttal period at the end. Sure. Or opportunity, I should say. Mr. Richard, are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm a neighbor. I signed the letter. I'm across the street, 2 doors down at 2087 West Mountain.
And your name?
Oh, Richard Ayub, I'm sorry, at 2087 West Mountain. Forgot to say my name. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard. I did sign the letter. I'm just down the street, 2 doors down and across the street. My view would be looking out over to my left and to the east. over the structure that's proposed. We've got no problem with it at our house. There's a house 2 doors over from them that's directly across the street from us. I don't know the address off the top of my head. This appears to us to be consistent with the houses on the same side of the street. I leave it to your, expertise to match it all up with respect to grade and things like that. But it certainly isn't out of character, certainly isn't too big. It's something that would be acceptable to all of us in the neighborhood. I'd answer any questions if you have any thoughts. That's just wanted to make that point, rather than just be a signature on a piece of paper. Okay? Thank you.
For taking the time. Next speaker is Severa Martirosyan. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Hello, everyone. My name is Savada Martirosyan, and I live south of the property, so right behind it. And just
immediately behind it.
Yes, right behind it. And just to start off, I just want to say it's a beautiful home. I want to build a beautiful home and enjoy it and be happy with it. The concern I have is pretty much the massing and the height of it, because it seems like, based on what the architect said, they're counting from the elevated height. But I actually have pictures, and the issue is it's just really high, and it not only for privacy issues, but also it takes away a good amount of our views as well. And I think is one of the main reasons because it's actually elevated, which is not the same as a lot of those houses on that street. So the height actually might be exceeding it if you count it based off of the grade that it is currently, not the elevated. And I did take some pictures just for you to see how grand it looks.
Thank you.
And where were these pictures taken from?
Right in our backyard.
Are you standing on the ground?
Yes, I'm on ground. And I even took it almost like from like where I'd be looking
So
at.
is that, let's say in this picture, is that your rear wall?
No, that's actually the garage. So that's actually from right in front of the garage, like in our driveway.
Got it. Okay, that makes more sense.
And then the other picture should be in the middle of our backyard looking up. And you could see how extremely massive it is, overlooking a few of our properties and our neighbors.
I'm sorry, your address one more time?
2061.
2061, so it would be the property
Precisely.
directly below you.
Exactly.
So,
So you're the most impacted person of the neighborhood, basically.
I feel so, because I really do feel so, but also the neighbors to the left and right. And I do know the neighbor to the left at least has an issue too. I just asked him if he had an issue, and he said the height was really bothersome to him as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask another question. So there's 20 some odd neighbors that have recommended approval, have said they have no issue with the design. Were you approached?
Yes.
Okay. And when they approached you, they explained to you the scope of the project, and you said that you're not in support, or are you saying that you want it to be, well, I don't want to ask a compound question. You were approached, you decided, you were given the opportunity to support the project.
Yes.
Is your signature on this document?
No, it's not.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to go back to the applicant, Mr. Khan, or the architect, Mr. Saroyan. Who would like to address the rebuttal, or both, separately?
How about I start off and we'll see where it goes?
Sounds good.
Okay, first of all, I just want to put it out there very clearly. We can absolutely work with staff in terms of the conditions, and being able to approve it if you were so to see it that way for approval with conditions. Yes, we can. There's no question about that. The second thing was I was just asking the property owner and the architect, are we able to look at this and drop this house down some? I don't know what some means, but at least to be able to alleviate that concern either by the gentleman that spoke or the board or the staff. And I think the answer to that question is yes, we can do that as well. We see this as an opportunity to get this project moving forward. It's been sitting now for a few years, not being able to be occupied. So we'd like to get this resolved this evening, and we'd like to be able to address the concerns that we heard.
Mr. Khan, when you're done, I have a question.
I'm done.
I like the spirit this evening.
Yes. At this late hour.
Get it done.
The homeowner, were they the homeowners at the time of the fire?
Yes.
So, okay, that answers that question. The size of the property is, see how I can phrase this into a question. The 2-year period that you spent working with staff?
Mhm.
No. No?
I believe it was 1 year, which
Okay.
is still a long time.
Okay. The 1 year that you spent working with staff, or however much time you spent working with staff, has this been the design, more or less, that you've been advocating?
No, I think it's changed in terms of over the last, whether it's been a year or 9 months, I don't know how long it's been, but there's been different variations of it. So no, this has not been the same design, and it's not been as small tweaks here or there. It was substantially changed over the course of conversations and design.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I actually have a question with architect Mr. Soroyan. From what I'm gathering, the really epicenter of concern here is twofold. One is the raised site. The other is some of the undulation of the design as it relates to the boxiness of the design and really the ornamentation and the style as proposed. Now, we'll start with the bigger one, which is the height, which really is what impacts the neighbor and everybody else. The way I'm reading section 8.5 is that the lower level plate height is 12 feet and the upper level plate height is 11 feet.
Yes.
And so, on the lower level, is it necessary to have such a high ceiling of 12 feet and then 11 feet? Because that, on a home this size, obviously, that makes a difference. And so, we're really talking about the height of the building, which is, I think, what staff is referring to of the plate height. That's number one. Are you amenable to lowering those plate heights, or is there a specific reason why they're so big, or high, I should say?
Especially the second floor.
Especially
It's like normally, but
right.
You know, the way I'm looking at it, going back to whatever year or the months or whatever that we have gone back and forth with the staff, they never had a concern about the cell height, both at the first and second floor. And actually, I saw these comments about 5 days ago, or the conditions. That was Friday afternoon, late afternoon time, when I saw everything. And there was no time even to address those issues because they were major issues that could have been done in 3-4 days, actually. I personally don't have any problem reducing the height, both at the first and second floor, if that will ease the concerns that you or the staff may have or
It just
have.
hadn't come up earlier.
Yeah.
Fair answer, fair question. And insofar as some of the other conditions as they relate to the ornamentality of the ironwork, front door, etc., are those something that you feel as though you could work with staff as well?
That we can work with the staff, of course, yeah. If since the owner agreed that we can push the house a little bit down, and then by reducing the overall height of the cells, it will help the massing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Because you know, even if you ended up with a 9-foot clear ceiling on the first level, that's a 3-foot reduction just in itself from 12 to 9. And then on the second level, if you even went from 11 to even 9 foot, which is still a high ceiling for a second level, so that's 5 feet that we've reduced the building.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, and then if you reduce, let's say, even a foot or 18 inches in the front, now you've 6'6" you've come down, which will make a drastic difference. Okay. That's wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anybody, I'm sorry, is there any other questions for the architect? Okay. With that, we'll close the public portion. Mr. Charchin, do you want to start us off?
Please, thank you. Okay, I agree with staff's comments and conditions. I think that there is some serious issues with ornamentality on the project and it's conforming and flowing through the property. My biggest concern with this project was the height. Okay, this is, again, an infill project. It was subject to a fire. And traditionally, what a neighborhood expects when there's a fire, especially one that doesn't burn the property down to the ground, is that it's going to come back kind of in the same fashion. So I'm actually quite surprised that so many of the neighbors, except for the one that was directly impacted, are in support. But my concern really is conformity. And when you look at that front view by the home, which we have here in front of us with the story poles in this particular picture, what we had before and what we have now are night and day as far as massing, right? The majority of the mass on this lot is in the back. You have a very low profile, almost, I'd say a single story. It is a single story in the front. And now we're going to a 2-story. And as you clearly, Mr. Simona clearly identified, with really large plate heights, right? And so that I think is my issue. Now, the question then becomes is if you do reduce those plate heights, and you do address the fact that they were building up the pad to make it level on a pretty sloping lot, how much does that change the overall design? And are we able to, condition it for staff to approve? The applicant says they can work with staff. I'm sure staff is more than capable. But I would
need direction.
I would need some serious reduction in the plate height on both stories, and I would be very opposed to building up the pad because it creates too much monumentality. This neighborhood is a mixed neighborhood of single-story and 2-story homes, and even though this home is not large, and this is actually an interesting one from that perspective, square footage-wise, this home is not that large. But it looks like and feels like a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot home because of the monumentality. And that really needs to, I think, be scaled back. The ironwork and so forth, I think, there could be some give and play there, and I think you can end up with some really nice design work. And then on the back portion, I think in the rear elevation, you have just a lot of ironwork and a very ornate door, and so it just seems a little strange, and it doesn't seem to fit what the front is of the home is doing. But those are my thinking. Those are my thoughts for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Charchin. Mr. Bellion.
I would like to start by first commending the owner and the architect for reaching out to the neighborhood and getting all the signatures, and it shows from the people that show up, only, one person came to speak about the project in an area like this. So I think that's well done. I also like to commend you guys for being so open and making it easy on us with the agreeing to keeping the pad lower, lowering the sill heights, because I think the height and the monumentality of the house was the biggest issue. Other than that, I agree with most of the comments that Mr. Charchin mentioned. The metal needs to be basically scaled down. It kind of doesn't, it's overdone for this kind of styled house. So I agree with staff. And I also agree with staff. I'm against raising up the pad. That's extra grading. That's unnecessary, number one. Number two, that adds mass. We're trying to reduce the mass. Number three, this is the trend in the neighborhood. You want to keep it. You want to stay within the trend. You don't want to be the house that is on the sidewalk versus the houses next to you are the one below sidewalk. These are my comments. So I think I can support the project with the conditions that we spoke about. I think staff did a wonderful job, and I'm for it.
I totally agree with the board members. I believe the
Yeah,
condition.
we agreed tonight on something, right?
That's right. That's right. I think we agreed on a lot of items on the last one too. It's just one portion. So, insofar as this one project is concerned, I think, as you've mentioned, you've been at this for a long time, and in the spirit of Mr. Khan's, let's get this done tonight. I think there's a certain spirit and understanding what it takes to get this project approved this evening. We do appreciate the very kind of frank dialogue that occurred, and I do agree in that the conditions are spot on, and with my colleagues, I think at 9-foot sill height on the lower level, and either 8'6" or 9 on the second floor, and keeping the grade as close as possible to where it is. Obviously, you got to have some maneuverability. If you need to go up a foot from where you're at, or 9 inches to make it work, you make it work. But the idea is not to, obviously bring in 3 feet of dirt and have to go through the compaction and all that. So I think we're all on the same page. So with that, can we review the conditions?
One of the staff conditions about providing more articulation and reducing some of the mass possibly at the second floor is something we worked in our series of meetings trying to accomplish, and we add a condition like that to a staff report like this when we think it's a fairly serious issue. I think I heard the board say that they would like that, but I wasn't clear. So if you could just clarify that, and if you do want us to work to change the massing, provide more articulation, give us a little more guidance, would be very helpful.
There's a picture of a neighboring home. And I don't know if it would work here. 2033 West Mountain. Where?
Which number?
Number 7. I'm sorry. On the plurals. I see the articulation here as somewhat achieving that, set further back, I think, than the subject property. But I do agree that some articulation would be beneficial. I think once the property height is dropped, that is going to go very far in addressing mass. And I think if you're doing it, at the same grade as the neighboring properties and not bringing it up to sidewalk grade, is also going to go very far in mass. So I think it's a give and take with articulation. I think that if the house goes down, it might work because it won't appear so massive. But a little play with the corners and so forth might work, especially with the front entry. The front entry looks a little awkward, to be honest.
I agree. I think with Mr. Charchian, that when you look at it, there's a level of mass and bulk to it that lends you to believe that it's bigger than it is. But also some of the details as it relates to the entry, as it relates to, I think, that balcony facing the street, and how it only seems to have like an 18-inch parapet kind of a thing behind the mansard. Some of the other details need to all work out. So I do believe that the board is taking staff in that direction, and it seems as though the applicant would work with you on that.
Okay. So we will retain the staff, excuse me, the staff comments. We'll refine them to include approximate reductions in terms of ceiling roof or ceiling heights. 9 foot at the first floor, 8.5 or 9 at the second floor. We'll retain the staff comment about maintaining the existing grade rather than raising the grade, with the caveat that there may be some fluctuations needed. In terms of condition 2, we'll specify that the board is looking primarily at the front entry and a little bit about at the second floor, possibly gaining a little more articulation similar to the neighboring house that you mentioned, which we'll use as an example.
I mean, that was one where I looked at that and said, that works, you know, that particular home works. And over the garage, there could be some play with that volume over the garage for articulation purposes. But again, I think Mr. Simonian's spot on. I think you lower it, and then you look to see if that achieves it, and if not, you play around a little bit with the articulation.
And so that would be, I think, all of the conditions that I have.
Okay. Could we entertain a motion?
I'll move to approve the project with the conditions stated.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call. Board Member Bendelian?
Yes.
Board Member Charchian?
Yes.
Chair Simonian?
Yes.
The motion carries to approve with conditions 3-0.
The next project is PDR 1623783 4742 New York Avenue. Ms. Zematitis, take it away.
It's very dry out there.
You could hand that to me. Yeah, take it.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Chairman Simonian, board members, the case before you is a new two-story, 2,330 square foot single-family residence with an attached two-car garage on a 6,200 square foot corner lot zoned R1, floor area district 2. And I'd like to point out the aerial image, and I'm gonna run back to bring that up as well. The lot, in terms of site planning, now the lot is a currently vacant lot. It has an existing retaining wall that's going to be removed. It is on the southeast corner of New York and Stevens Street, across from Clark Magnet High School. The residence and attached two-car garage are located towards the interior southerly property line of the irregularly shaped corner lot, and oriented towards New York Avenue. Now, New York being the street front and Stevens Street being the side street. This orientation and placement on the lot is appropriate and consistent with code. The project provides a 25-foot street front setback from New York, which is more than ample space for the required 18-foot long driveway, and also provides ample setbacks both from the rear property line, approximately 19 feet, 11 feet from Stevens when a 6-foot is only required, and a 6-foot interior setback from the property to the south. so the project complies with or exceeds all required setbacks. Aside from the building footprint and the driveway, the rest of the lot is primarily devoted to landscaping and minor hardscape areas such as a small patio area at the back, and then also a smaller area, and it's best seen in the landscape plan, which is down here. There is a pervious surface gravel pit area that sort of allows seating in the front around a fire pit, and then landscaping throughout the rest of the lot that has been specifically designed to complement the odd-shaped corner lot and provide access and a landscaped area for the property that is drought tolerant. Yes.
So the fire pit would be right by the front door?
You would not really see it because the lot itself, and thank you for pointing that out, the lot has quite a bit of not quite a bit, it's not a hillside home, but it does have somewhat of a drop going from north to south, and so they would take advantage of it as a small retaining wall at the front seating area. So the existing block wall around the perimeter of property would remain. They would be obviously demoing the block wall that's located in the center of the property adjacent, and they would also be providing a wooden perimeter property wall along Stevens Court to somewhat enclose the rear yard, but it would be consistent with code in terms of a setback. So, in terms of mass and scale, the next section of the staff report devoted towards the actual height and massing of the property. You'll notice that it's a two-story proposed structure. The overall height is approximately 24 feet, which is less than the 25-foot maximum height plate or a 28-foot if it's a pitched roof in the R1 zone. The two-story structure will be the fourth two-story structure within the 300-foot survey area of single-family homes and one of the largest of the homes in the survey area in terms of floor area ratio. However, the project mass and scale will not be incompatible with the surrounding context. The site, as mentioned, it's a corner site, so you have greater visual space around the building, and it also provides extra distance on two elevations for access to light and air and circulation and the maintenance of property of adjacent. So you only have two adjacent properties. The second story is pulled back from the ground floor and the building elevations are modulated. So the building form itself is broken down and appears less massive. Massing of the second story is also specifically located towards the southerly side, as opposed to having the mass, the original proposal when we worked with the architect, the original mass was actually at the front, which was at the higher portion of the lot. And the architect designer actually went ahead and relocated the mass based on discussion so that it's on the lower portion of the lot where it slopes down, where it's more appropriate. So, and it has a less massive appearance. The sufficient articulation in volumetric forms. There's the planar variations and the building elevations, and the breaks in the roof line all help to reduce the mass. And the neo-craftsman style of architectural design, there's also obviously the use of materials, which again sort of helps diminish the apparent size. Simply from viewing from, again, this would be the north, this would be the street front facing elevation on New York, and the side street facing elevation on Stevens Street. So there's the changes in both the material and the planes help diminish the overall size. Lastly, the 4 and 12 gabled roof forms of the second story atop the lower floor, featuring a combination of gabled and hip roofs, provide an appropriate scale and proportion for the structure. So, last but not least, in terms of building design and detailing, the surrounding property is essentially a mix of architectural styles and residential building types in a surrounding neighborhood, North Glendale, in a single-family residential home, except for the fact that you do have the Clark Magnet High School across from New York. Not across, but across New York. The proposal, as you notice, is a somewhat neo-craftsman style residence. It features a variety of cladding materials and decorative elements that are appropriate to the design, and the North Glendale plan tends to recommend craftsman or somewhat pseudo-craftsman style homes featuring the river rock, which they have here in the pillar base, the variety of materials, which includes shingles and the vertical siding as well underneath the gable on the gable ends. The porch is tucked under the side gable roof, which again is reminiscent of craftsman homes, which with their front porches. The overall combination of gabled and hip roof forms is handled well and are appropriate to the design, and decorative wood corbels and vertical siding are proposed on the ends of the gable roof, as mentioned. The exterior of the first floors of the elevations are stucco, while the second floor is clad in hardy shingle siding in keeping with other neo-craftsman projects that have a variety of facade treatments. And the project includes white simulated divided light casement windows with craftsman-inspired mullions across the top, so basically 3/1, which again harkens back to the craftsman style. Each of the windows is also surrounded with the trim, and there is a detail in your design packet with regards to the windows. That concludes staff's presentation. Staff recommends approval of the project. There was just one recommendation that any additional stone cladding needed to augment the proposed rubble stone, and it will match in terms of color and overall shape. So the applicant is proposing to utilize any of the stones found on site to actually go onto the cladding. So the applicant is in the audience, as well as the landscape architect, Ms. Judy Palmer. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Ms. Zemazaitis? No. No. Thank you. Mr. Kendall Halls, welcome.
Good evening.
Good
My name
to
is
see you
Kendall
again.
Hales. Good to see you again. Back for another project. And good evening. Thank you to the zoning staff for their help on this project. It's nice to finally get to this point in the projects. Takes some time. I've been building homes here in Lockwood Center for over 27 years. In fact, Rodney Kahn used to be my planner, and years and years ago. And my first DRB meeting was in 1990, and we met in the little room off of the Design Review Board's office. That was the meeting room where all the neighbors would get together. So it's been some time. I enjoy what I do, building these homes and designing them. The most stressful part of my whole business is what happens right here in this meeting, because it's always an unknown. I never know which way the board's going to go. And not only because, you know, I'm on TV with the 5 million people that are tuned in right now, right? But
we wish we had.
Yeah, exactly. So to try to mitigate the unknown, I really utilize the city zoning staff, and I use their expertise in designing these homes. So I rely on them, and I really listen to their ideas and their comments and take those to heart. So let's get going. This is a vacant lot at the corner of New York Avenue and Stevens Street in the Lockwood Center area. It's in the northern annex area, and it's across the street from Clark Magnet School. That's where I went to junior high. So I know that community well. It's been a place where I've grown up. And so when I design these homes, it's important to me that I design something that's going to work well in the community, and it's going to be there for a long time. And in 100 years, maybe that home will be on the on one of the historic, you know, preservation lists or something. So anyway, what I like about the neo-craftsman style is first that it's easy to add a lot of architectural features and make the building interesting, and there's a lot of historical value in the craftsman design, of course, and that can be seen throughout the community. And finally, I like the ability to incorporate the low-pitched roofs because that helps not impose on neighbors' views. and keeps our beautiful mountain ranges open. If you've been to the site, I wonder if you drove by and saw the story poles there. You can see how the building is not empowering in the neighborhood. The low-pitched roof still leaves an open view of the mountains. You can see the perspective that I did there taken from Stevens Street at street level. The mountains behind the house are still very well visible, and I did those things for that specific purpose, to maintain those views. In working with the the actual layout of the house, I went through several designs, and one that I thought I really liked, but after meeting with the zoning staff, they made several suggestions that I actually made a big difference, and I liked even more than the designs that I came up with. And so that's where the idea in this design we finally came up with. There's a lot of time and thought that go into these projects. One part of the lot that I felt really needed to be incorporated into the actual structure of the house was the natural slope of the lot on the north side. For some reason, there's a weird retaining wall on this vacant lot that's like too high and doesn't retain that much, but I thought it was important to be able to set the house down, utilize the natural slope, and actually utilize the footing and the foundation of the house to create both a retaining wall and use it as part of the house so the house could sit down and give a better, again, set the house lower so that I'm not impacting neighbors and people, and keeping the structure lower helped utilize the natural grade. As you can see, the neo-craftsman style residence will feature various cladding materials and decorative elements that are appropriate to this design, including the gabled roof with board and batten gabled ends, decorative corbels, natural stone that we find on site, and I won't have any problem with finding enough stone. When we start digging footings, I usually have to export the stone. So there'll be plenty there that we can utilize on those rock little retaining wall in the front and the columns for sure. My proposed color palette consists of muted grays with white trim and a vintage green colored water table detail along the base of each gable. And the same vintage green color will be used on the front door. The exterior of the first floor and second floors of the elevations are a combination of stucco and fiber cement shingles that have appropriately been located in keeping with the neo-craftsman style of the home. There are several homes surrounding me that are similar in size. My neighbor's home just to the south is almost 2,100 square feet. And there's a home 2 doors up that's 2,154 square feet. And as the staff said, there are a few other homes in the neighborhood as well that are 2 stories. The required setback from Stevens Street is only 6 feet, but I've positioned the house so that the closest point is just under 12 feet. But if you look at the average setbacks, which aren't required in the zoning for me to calculate those, but I did a calculation, the first floor average on the Stevens side is 20 feet, and the average second floor setback on that side is 29 feet. And the same occurs on the New York side of the house, where the first floor is 25 feet and the second floor average is over 29 feet. I feel this design goes a long way in mitigating the impact of a new home on this corner lot, pulling the structure back from the setbacks, the low-pitched roofs, and the well-designed...
By the way, that was the time limit.
Was that it?
That was it.
Okay. So anyway, in keeping with the project, I've hired Judy Palmer, and I'll turn the time over to her to have her review the landscaping.
You use all the time.
Oh, so she submitted her card, so she gets her time.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
What is the finished floor elevation of the proposed house?
The finished floor elevation.
Yeah, in other words, the top of the retaining wall is 1820 that surrounds the gravel fire pit.
Right.
What, more or less, what is your finished floor of the building?
From that top of the retaining wall, it's 2 feet lower, about 2 to 2.5 feet. That's how, from where the natural grade hits the house, my floor is about 2.5 feet lower than that.
Okay. And I noticed you're not providing a separate walkway to, oh, thank you. You're not providing a separate walkway over to the house? and you're integrating it into the driveway.
Correct.
Wouldn't it make sense to have a separate walkway to the house?
You know, a lot of that comes to expense and creating the extra walkway. It's not a big deal if that's something that
Oh.
that DRB.
No, I thought you were trying not to put it into landscaping it more or anything
No,
like that.
no,
Okay.
I'm really
It's efficient.
flexible when it comes to that. Yeah, sure.
And placing the gravel fire pit at the front of the house on a busy street seems a little bit counterintuitive when you have this rear yard, or even you have all this abundance of site setback off of Stephen, that you could maybe create more privacy with mature vegetation, or even like a wood fence or something like that.
That is something that Judy will have to address, because I don't have anything to do with the landscaping. I turn everything over to her and let her do whatever she wants, because I trust her and I love what she comes up with. So I don't really direct her in that. I let her use her creativity in
Any
that.
other questions for Mr. Halls? No? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you very much.
Judy Palmer, landscape architect. Yeah,
Nice to see
good
you.
evening.
Judy Palmer, Oakendale Place, La Crescenta. Regarding your question on the privacy, the backyard's not that large as far as entertaining. So where that rock wall comes around, there would be a 4 to 5 foot hedge in front of that, blocking from the street. So it, in essence, becomes a privacy area without putting a fence up. It just becomes a green area.
Okay.
And I think also in trying to use a front walkway to the property, you'd be stepping down. It's just a better transition and encloses area, better area coming from the driveway. Any other questions?
No.
Good to see you again.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't have any other speaker cards, or if they are around, I'm not seeing them. Anybody else from the audience that would like to speak? Come on up, introduce yourself, state your name for the record, and you could give your card to Steph or me. Welcome. And your name for the record.
My name is Sylvia Belina. I live like 4726.
How do you spell that, so I put it in here?
Balina. That's my last name, and my first name is Sylvia, Sylvia.
Okay.
I live 4726 New York Avenue. I'm not opposed because it's really nice. I just have a few questions on, how long this will take, and where the parking's gonna be at, because when the school reopened, I used to live, I moved there like a long time ago, like 26 years ago, and I used to have so much parking space. And then the school came in, they took chunks and chunks and chunks, and my kids are all grown and they're all driving, so I'm out of space. So I just wanted to know where everything's gonna be at with construction, because my neighbors, I don't think they, want me parking their front, So those are just the little things I want to ask.
Okay.
And then the two-story side, I know there's one on the other side which doesn't block view, but on like the upper part, I don't know if they're gonna have a blocked view going down. But which is not my concern because I still have my view. So just all those little things.
We'll address your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Halls, I know you. Hales. I apologize. Mr. Hales. Come on up. I know you have a rebuttal period anyways, but if you would just more specifically address the questions
Sure.
about your parking, your orientation of your driveway, staging of construction,
Right.
and the other questions which.
So in a project like this, it's not a large project, and the lot is for the most part flat in front of the house. Most of the time during the construction, the workers will be pulling onto the property. We've got 25 feet, 2 cars wide, and there's an apron already in place, so that's easy to drive the trucks in, and so we have the whole driveway area to park. And I would imagine from the red painted curb back to the driveway, we would be parking right in front of the structure. I don't typically have, 8 to 10 trucks at the job site parked at the same time. So it's not a large project like that would require that.
And insofar as the second story blocking views, your view is not being impacted, but if somebody else's, well, we can't have cross communication, but
So
have you
across
dealt
this-
with that specific issue? And I know you've moved your massing towards the
Sure.
south.
If you look at that picture on Stevens Street, that's taken from street level. And the homes across the street are actually up, elevated, probably 6 feet from the street. So I would imagine if I stood up on the lot from the neighbors across the street, I would see those mountains over the roof of my house.
They're almost at the same level as your bedroom level, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be more representative of how it actually is. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Nope. With that, we'll close the public portion. Mr. Bellion, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think this one is an easy one. Well-designed project, and I have no comments. I like it.
Oh, short and sweet. Short and sweet. Mr. Charchin?
I'll be just a little longer.
You couldn't just keep it short?
Yeah, it's going to be short. So I think exactly, it's well designed. It conforms with the neighborhood. It utilizes a style that makes sense. The landscape plan really addresses the unique shape of the lot, and also privacy and concerns and private space concerns. So it's very well done, and I think it'd be a good addition. And I'm sure the neighbors would much appreciate seeing a landscaped property with a house on it versus that lot that's been there for 100+ years in that condition. So I'm in support of the project.
Okay. I support the project as well. It is articulated and very well designed, which is more or less a modern contemporary, has the appropriate scale and detailing and look and feel to it. Overall, it fits into the site just fine, and you could tell you've just really gone beyond really the expectations of setbacks and code requirements to really nestle it into the site, which we appreciate. So I wholeheartedly support the project. Could someone entertain a motion? And before that, we got one motion. We have one condition on the table, which the staff want to go over.
The recommendation or the condition was that any additional stone cladding needed to augment the proposed rubble stone will match in terms of color and overall shape.
And that's a recommendation.
Well, it's a condition.
It's a condition in case they don't pull enough stone. Mr. Hales is probably right that there will be enough stone, but we just wanted to throw it in there.
Okay.
Or you're welcome to approve it with no conditions if you'd like to eliminate that.
Which is so rare.
Well, does the board want to entertain a motion?
Motion to approve with the one condition.
I'll second that.
I have a motion to approve with that one condition by Board Member Charchian and a second by Board Member Benlian. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian,
Yes.
Board Member Charchian,
Yes.
and Chairman Simonian.
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0.
Okay.
Thank you. We have 2 sets of minutes for approval this evening.
I see one.
One would be the minutes of October the 13th. Board members Benlian, Charchian, and Simonian, all 3 of you were present that evening.
Where is the? It's over there. I think I don't have a copy.
And if you'd like, I have an extra copy if you'd like to take a look.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
So there's a move, Mr. Bellion moved to approve the October 13 minutes.
And is there a second?
Second.
So,
Moving on to November 10th.
and I would imagine that that's a unanimous approval, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
And I was absent at the November 10th,
correct.
so could minutes be approved with 2 board members?
Yes, you can approve that.
Former those in attendance.
It's a major, correct.
Somebody want to move? Oh,
Well, I wasn't here.
So it'd either be,
So you can chair, okay, that's fine. So I would make a motion to approve the minutes of November 10th.
I second.
I have a motion by Board Member Charchian and a second by Board Member Benlian. So approval 2-0. And which leads us to last staff announcements. This is the very last meeting, last Design Review Board meeting of 2016. Staff would like to extend holiday greetings to all of the Design Review Board members and to everyone in the audience. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, and we will see everyone back here at the first meeting of January 2012, I believe on January the 17th. Is that correct?
Yeah, you said 2012.
I'm sorry, 2017. 2017. So.
Well, happy holidays to everybody as well, and to the public, and to the staff, and may you all have a very happy and blessed holiday season.
Thank you. So motion to adjourn at almost 8 o'clock?
Adjourned.
Adjourn.
Thank you.